We begin this morning with the Justice Department's criminal investigation into Minnesota Governor Tim Walz and Minneapolis Mayor Jacob Frey for allegedly obstructing federal immigration enforcement. According to the Washington Post, the DOJ's plan to issue subpoenas suggests that the Justice Department is examining whether Walz's and Frey's public statements disparaging the surge of officers and federal actions have amounted to criminal interference in law enforcement work. Now, this comes just days after President Trump threatened to invoke the Insurrection Act in Minnesota over anti-ICE protests. But now he's saying there's no reason to use it yet. Adding more fuel to the fire, White House Deputy Chief of Staff Stephen Miller this week baselessly accused Minnesota officials of staging a, quote, insurgency against the federal government, and also falsely labeled the protesters as insurrectionists.
In Minnesota right now, the insurrectionists have come out of hiding. They're confronting our officers on the street. They're being arrested. This is a national security priority. More arrests of insurrectionists are being made every day, and each of those arrests then provides an opportunity to learn more about the network from a law enforcement and national security standpoint.
Yesterday, in a new interview with MS Now, Hennepin County Attorney Mary Moriarty gave a strong reaction to what's happening on the ground and to Trump toying with the idea of invoking the Insurrection Act.
We are under attack by our own federal government, which is unprecedented. We're peaceful. And we're trying to exercise our First Amendment rights. The Insurrection Act has only been invoked 30 times in the history of this country. It is frightening. It is completely unnecessary. The only entity causing chaos here is ICE. There's nothing different here in terms of protesting than what we have seen here for years. And local law enforcement knows how to handle that.
Last night, a U.S. district judge in Minnesota ruled that federal officers on the ground cannot detain or use tear gas on peaceful protesters who are not obstructing authorities. Joining us now, Michelle Norris, MS Now's senior contributing editor, and Ankush Kadori, senior writer at Politico magazine and a former federal prosecutor. Michelle, Ankush, welcome back to the weekend. So, Michelle, I'm going to go back to what I talked about at the beginning of this intro, and that is the impending indictment of the governor of Minnesota and the Minneapolis mayor for, quote unquote, disparaging comments against federal officials. What's that about? Is this a real thing, or is this just more of President Trump acting out on his retribution and revenge campaign?
Well, lawsuits are a real thing. So, yes, it is a real thing. They are apparently under investigation. And if you listen to them, they would say this is another act of retribution to try to silence them. If you listen to what they have said very carefully, they have both, they're politicians, so they they use their words very carefully, but they've also had legal counsel because they thought that they understood that this might be coming. Mm-hmm. And so they've been very careful to say that you have a right to protest, because Americans do, but you should do it in a peaceful way. Let's remember, this is Minneapolis. They understand what's at stake. They've seen the city burn before in the wake of
5 years ago.
And 6 years ago, just almost 6 years and 6 blocks away. Mm-hmm. So they understand what's at stake. So they've been very careful in the language and telling people that you can protest, but please be peaceful. Please keep at a distance. And this is, this lawsuit is coming in the same week that President Trump talked about enacting retribution on the state. And so, people can see what they see. I mean, this is the interesting case about this, is this is happening, this is playing out on public televisions.
Right.
They're saying that they are at war, and if you're looking at the images that are coming out, it's a war of words, but you have people who are armored, with aggressive, and without, and they don't have to answer to anyone in the state, and they are anonymous. So they're armed, armored, anonymous, aggressive, and they don't have to answer to any other state authority. And people are seeing that on the screens every night because of the videos that are being taken throughout the state.
Ankush, we have seen this DOJ go after senators. They've been going after members of Congress. I don't think any of us are surprised that they went after them, this governor and the mayor of Minneapolis, but I think we should all be shocked by it, right? Because this, if there was an obvious something there, right? Like if we all saw them, if Walz sat in front of people and said, go out there and bust those heads, he would not say that. You know who has said stuff like that? Donald Trump. I'll move on. But when you are looking at this from the legal part of this, the investigation, real or not, does cause an issue, right, for both of these men. They have to pay. The state will pay the lawyers, but the people of Minnesota will have to pay their lawyers. They will spend a lot more time doing this. They will be asked about this over and over again. But that's part of the strategy from this administration.
Yes. So I think about it. I tried to sort of break it up into a bunch of discrete parts in terms of how we might think about the process. So first of all, as an investigative matter, the notion of investigating these gentlemen for these reasons, it's a terrible idea and a frivolous endeavor.
Yeah.
Okay, just on the merits, for the reasons Michelle described. Now, in terms of where they can get with this process, now, as many of us Americans are now learning, right, to bring a federal indictment, you have to get a grand jury to sign off. I don't think the odds of getting a grand jury to sign off in Minnesota on charging their own statewide elected leaders under circumstances like this, with the controversy.
And on the basis of zero evidence.
Right.
Correct.
They
Correct.
strictly said, please protest
Correct.
peacefully.
Right. So not only is it meritless, but they don't have the sort of forum shopping option really available to them in this case. So, but to your point, the process, or excuse me, your point, Eugene, the process itself can be a form of punishment. Yeah. And I also don't want to be totally flip about it. When the administration has tried and put their foot on the pedal in these instances and sort of jerry-rigged the process, as they did in the case of obtaining James Comey's indictment, they can get an indictment and make life miserable for people. So we shouldn't be flip about it, but I just want to try to be clear about each step in this process.
Yeah.
Michelle, I want to get back to something that you mentioned about an underlying issue with the presence of ICE officers in Minnesota here, which is that they are not held to account to anyone other than the Trump administration and the operation that they were sent to the state to carry out. That may or may not be changing. Judge Kate Menendez, the U.S. District Judge, last night ruled that immigration enforcement operation officers cannot detain or tear gas peaceful protesters who aren't obstructing authorities, including when these people are observing the agents. So that, to me, feels like an order that is simply reinforcing our First Amendment rights. And the injunction notably did not include some of the explicit protections that were requested by the plaintiffs, such as recording ICE agents or being forced to report to a judge every night to lay out what exactly they did that day and lay out the rationale for why they arrested certain people. What do you think this order ultimately does at the end of the day, then?
Well, it is comforting to those who are out on the street, and there are thousands.
You just
of
left
people.
there.
I'm from Minnesota. I grew up very close to where this happened. Brene Good was killed, and very close to where George Floyd was murdered. There are thousands of people out on the street doing exactly this. So for the people who are constitutional observers, and that's what they call themselves, ICE monitors, there is some comfort in this, but there's a question of whether there is any teeth in this enforcement. I mean, a district judge in Illinois ruled that ICE enforcement officers should have operable body cams. And what we're seeing out of the Brene Good killing is cell phone footage, but not necessarily body cams. So it's a question of the federal law. It really is what we're learning here is how fragile our system is. That we have federal laws, but it relies on people being able to enforce them, and so follow them. And so Judge Menendez issues a ruling that that is meant to protect people who are engaged in, she used the word, protected activity. But at the same time, the message coming down from Washington is that the enforcement agents on the street have total immunity. So they're getting a very different message from their bosses here in Washington, D.C. And, and people get qualified immunity in some cases, but the idea that they would have total immunity means that they're not operating with guardrails. Essentially that they can do whatever they want, and the only people they have to answer to are the people who think that they have qualified immunity, and they are able to basically supersede any kind of guardrails that exist for law enforcement, and that they're not working with local law enforcement also, which is one of the big issues here. Normally there would be some coordination between the sheriff's office and between the local and two cities, Minneapolis, St. Paul, and really they're all over the state, so all the jurisdictions throughout the state, and there's a real lack of coordination here. And so I think that the one, just last point, this was this case was brought in early December. It involves actions that happened at the beginning of the surge in Minnesota. People on the ground, lawyers that I talked to last night, said that the facts of the case might be very different if this came out later, because the level of enforcement has changed. It's more aggressive. There are more officers on the ground. So the judge has to deal with the facts of the case. And the facts of the case that was at the beginning of the surge, if, we're going to see a number of lawsuits, and this is not the only bite at that apple.
So then, Ankush, that actually sort of answers a question that Jackie had before we came on air. Initially, Jackie was like, what is the point of this judge's ruling, given what we have seen just in the last week since the killing of Renee Good? And Jackie's point was, isn't this judge just restating what's protected in the Constitution? Jackie has a point there on that.
It's very depressing that that's where we are.
Well, right, but to Michelle's point, the judge is reacting to facts presented in the case from last month. How do you think the facts on the ground now will impact future lawsuits?
Yes, well, you're expressing a very common frustration with how litigation in the United States works. So I can sympathize. No, Michelle's exactly right, and it's an important point, right? The judges have to deal with the facts that are available to them, the record that's available to them. What I would expect to see is efforts to supplement the record, potential additional motions, additional lawsuits to try to bring forth the more recent facts and try to move them into sort of the direction that Jackie's talking about.